Hey everybody, Trisha here with Sewing Parts Online. So today I'm going to show you how to sew a flat felled seam. So what's a flat felled seam? Flat felled seams are used when an item is going to see a lot of wear. They provide a very strong seam and leave the inside of the garment nice and tidy because all of the raw edges are encased. At times, the flat felled seam can be confused with the French seam. However, the flat felled seam is sewn down, whereas the French seam is not. I'll include a link at the end of this video for the French seam. This particular seam is often seen on jeans or on a Western shirt. With those two examples, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, right? To begin, place your fabric wrong sides together. I know, it feels weird. Pin or clip your fabric. Next, we need to sew our seam allowance. Because 5/8 of an inch is a really common seam allowance, that's what I chose to use today. On my machine, I've installed a regular presser foot. With this particular one, I can have my needle in left needle position, and from that point to my guide, I have a 5/8 inch seam allowance. If you're unsure or have an older machine that doesn't have markings on the needle plate, place a piece of washi tape or something to mark your guide. Now that I have my 5/8 inch seam allowance, trim away any little pieces of thread. Go ahead and open up your fabric and finger press your seam open. You have one seam allowance that stays the same, and the other one we're going to trim it down. Once we've done that, this is going to wrap around it and encase the narrow seam allowance. Quick note, you want the folded edge to be facing the back of your garment. With that in mind, I'm going to trim down this side. Flip that fabric out of the way and trim it down to approximately 1/8 to 1/4 inch. This particular seam finish does take a little bit longer to do, however, the results are so nice, I think it's worth it. At this point, I do like to grab my iron and press over the larger seam allowance, just so it lays nicely. Take your time when you're doing this. The more precise you are, the better finish you're going to get. Now what we're going to do is take the larger seam allowance and wrap it back to the original stitch line, and then fold it down, just like that. You can pin or press. Depending on the fabric, you'll soon find out which one you need to do. Again, we're bringing that back to the original stitch line and folding it over. If I were doing an actual project, I would get my seam gauge out and make sure that the distance is the same all the way down. We want it nice and tidy. You can already tell this is going to be a nice finish, right? Looking good. Now this is just one way to do a flat felled seam. There's other techniques, so you may come across different directions, but I'm showing you one that I know. For the final step, we need to stitch really close to the edge. Patterns will often say to stitch about 1/8 inch away. However, I like mine just a little closer than that. At this point, you can continue to use a regular foot, or you can swap out for an edge stitch foot. Personally, I like the edge stitch foot because I can put the fabric lip right up against that guide, and it keeps my edge stitching really nice and even. I'm just going to move my needle a little bit at a time, see what it looks like. Let's drop my needle and see where that's at. Yeah, that's looking good. Just take your time, use that guide. I think I'm gonna like that better. If at any point you've learned something, if you could go ahead and hit that like button, it'd be greatly appreciated. Also, if you're interested in receiving more videos like this, hit that subscribe button as well. That way you won't miss out. There we go. That's the front, and then that's the back. Now you can also consider if you wanted this look on the front, instead of starting with wrong sides together, you would start with fabric right sides together, and then this would be on the underside, and this would be on the top. So again, it's just your preference on the look that you're going for. Don't forget to check out our video on how to sew the French seam. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this is giving you the confidence to go out and sew some flat felled seams. Until next time, happy sewing, everybody.